Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the new polls that have come out, talking about generic ballot / national environment, and the shift that has occurred towards Democrats since Roe v. Wade was overturned. So, you might notice here I've got a tweet pulled up from my guy Alexia Jane. Follows me on Twitter. I follow him, so go follow AlexEagle17. He's really smart. He does a lot of good stuff. Highly recommend the follow there. But yeah, so let's talk about this. So as you can see right here, I'll read his tweet out. The same 2 to 3 point Dem boost that showed up in Marist, YouGov, and Morning Consult shows up in Rasmussen, goes from R+8 to R+5. Starting points do vary wildly, but at this point, between polls, fundraising numbers, and the Nebraska one special, there are consistent signs of a post-Dobbs bounce. Let me reiterate that. Consistent signs of a post-Dobbs bounce for the Democratic Party. Even in Rasmussen, which is a Republican-leaning pollster, in 2018 they notoriously swung and missed on the generic ballot. They had the GOP up by 1% in their final poll, and they lost it by 8.5%. So they have underestimated the Democrats consistently. Even in 2016, where nearly every pollster had the Democrats pinned for way more than they actually got. Rasmussen was big on Trump. I think they had Trump ahead in New Hampshire, ahead in Nevada, way more competitive than he actually was in New Mexico, in Colorado, and even I think they had some weird polls out of Virginia that had Trump leading there. And if you look at the Rust Belt, they were decent. I think that they overestimated Trump in every state but Wisconsin. But they were still, it's kind of like a broken clock is right twice a day. It's like Trafalgar. Evan Scrimshaw says that Trafalgar is like the guy who comes in casino, bets on red every time, acts like a genius, and then 1 out of every 3 times it's right and it works out for him. And I think Rasmussen's similar. They're a little less partisan than Trafalgar. Trafalgar is like an outright, we're Republicans, deal with it poll. Rasmussen, their Twitter account's very right-leaning. They don't admit to it, though, but yeah, they are a right-leaning poll. So when you're down by 5, R+5 was the result of a congressional ballot or generic ballot I was expecting about a month and a half, 2 months ago. I'm now down to R+3, by the way, so Democrats have surged in my prediction, too. And now Rasmussen, which is probably the best poll you're going to get for the Republicans, has it at R+5. So what that means is that the Democrats are likely doing a lot better than this. This is kind of like their floor. R+5 isn't a terrible estimate. I think it's a little generous to the GOP at this point, but if that's if there's a range of 20 outcomes, then R+5 is in the bottom 2-3 of those outcomes for Democrats. That's a very good thing for the party. And I think that Democrats should be happy they're only down 5% in Rasmussen, because I'm not saying this swing will happen again, but in 2018, they were down by a point. They outperformed by 9.5. If they outperform by the same amount in 2020, they'll be winning it by about the same amount Biden won the popular vote by. So, that's not likely to happen. A D+4.5 generic ballot would be incredible, and it would be to the shock of literally everyone. And I think that my brain would explode if that happened, and I'd probably quit doing politics. Just kidding, I still do it, but I would have much less confidence in my predictions. But when you look at these polls, every poll, even Rasmussen, has shown a bounce to Democrats since Roe v. was overturned. He said polls, fundraising numbers in the Nebraska one special. I think fundraising is a little obviously this isn't a knock on lack or anything, but I think fundraising is more just energy, which is good because more people are donating to Democrats, right? So it's good for them. But I think that when you look at concrete evidence, or at least shift in voting intention, Nebraska 1 was a Trump-less 11 district. The Democrats won, or the Democrats lost by about 6.5%, right? A little under 7. So 4.2 or 4.3% overperformance on that, on the Democrats' part there. And in a district that's suburban, in a district that's likely to trend blue in the future, in a district where the Democrats could be competitive by the end of the decade. So that's a good sign for them. And when you look at the primary turnout in a lot of states, it wasn't great for them in Illinois or Colorado, but it was very good in New York. And another thing is that we've learned primary turnout doesn't matter, because in the Nebraska election, the GOP outpaced Democrats 2-1 in that primary, and they only won the election by 6.8%. So primary turnout doesn't really matter, but if it did, it would be kind of a mixed result, which is actually primary turnout in the big states like California, New York, even Texas was okay for Democrats, is quite good for Democrats. Whereas in smaller states, Colorado wasn't too hot. It was pretty bad in Nevada. It wasn't it was actually pretty good in Georgia when you consider all circumstances. I mean, like the thing is, most like Democrats have incumbents in these states, and they have like uncontested primaries. Even Pennsylvania, which is a swing state, they don't have an incumbent senator or governor in. Their primaries were pretty like boring. Like Fetterman and Shapiro were easily like Shapiro ran unopposed. Fetterman was easily going to win the primary. Was the Republicans had a three-way chaotic primary between Oz, uh, Barnett, and McCormick, and so the Republican Party has had much more contested primaries, much more chaotic primaries than the Democrats have this year. And Democratic turnout still seems to be like on par with 2018. It's just the Republican turnout is surging. I think it's quite good for the Democrats because 2018 had more competitive primaries for the Democrats. Again, I think Republican primaries in 2018 were still more competitive than Democratic ones because Democrats had a ton of Senate incumbents in swing states. Brown, Tester, McCaskill, Donnelly, Heitkamp, Manchin, Donald. But in 2018, the Democrats had like decent primary turnout. 2022, they had also a decent primary turnout, but the Republican turnout has spiked. So I think, we're certainly going to see an environment that is much more favorable to Republicans than 2018 was, obviously. Now, that was a bit of a tangent. Back on topic here, let's talk about the polls. So, RCP has shown a big shift towards Democrats as of late. When you look at the polls at just a week or just 2 weeks ago, the GOP, I don't know why the page just refreshed, but anyways, just a few weeks ago, the GOP were up by, let's see, 3.5%. Yeah, they were up by 3.5%. It's now down to 2.2%. That is a 1.3% shift in all polls. You have to remember, RCP generally does lean a little Republican. I like them. I think they're pretty good. In 2020, they're actually dead on in Pennsylvania. I respect their aggregate a lot. I really like to use it. When it comes to October, I think we'll be looking at this a lot because RCP is very good at what they do, even though they do have a bit of a conservative bias. But Democrats are down 2.2% in the generic ballot congressionally. And I think that's actually a pretty fair number. I've got them down 3% in my prediction. So, R plus 2.2 in RCP is, pretty in line with what you'd expect. What I will say is that I think the poll, so you can make it, so here's my thing with polls this year. I think the national poll, like the Biden approval polls are terrible for Democrats. The national polls are like not good for Democrats. Like R plus 2 at this point is pretty good for Democrats, but like in the grand scheme of things, losing the popular vote for Democrats is still pretty bad. And so like when you look at the national polls, they're like kind of in line with what you'd expect, maybe a little more Republican tilting. Then we see these state polls that are like on crack. They're Fetterman +9, Beasley +4, Barnes +2, Christ beating DeSantis. Like a lot of these polls are just nonsensical and they're crazy. And some of them are in Democratic internals, other just polls that are just getting wacky results. And so I think you can't really tell me that, every poll's overestimating the Democrats when Biden's down 16% nationwide. The Republicans are leading the generic ballot. And I think that this kind of like, Democrats do this too, but I think I'm talking to Republicans when I talk about this. A lot of Republicans are picking and choosing the polls they're believing. They're saying, Biden's so unpopular and the generic ballot's leading towards us. And, polls underestimated us in 2020. So it's going to happen again. We'll win the generic ballot by 7 instead of 2 because plug in XYZ variables. And, if you add in the margin of underestimation or handicap for Republicans, it gets to this, right? Like I hear that all the time. You can say it, and I think in some cases it makes sense. But if you believe the Biden polls that have Biden down like in a ton of states, you also have to believe the other state polls that have Fetterman winning, that have Shapiro winning, that have Beasley winning, Tim Ryan competitive, Charlie Crist. Like there are a lot of polls that show, Biden terribly unpopular, like down 20 points in state, and the Democrats winning a Senate race there, right? So you can't just pick and choose what part of a poll you want to believe. So I think that for the generic congressional vote, what you're talking about is a swing towards Democrats post-Dobbs. If you talk about the most recent polls we've got, let's look at all these polls. So Emerson, their most recent figure was R plus 3. Prior to that, their most recent figure was R plus 6. So that's a 3-point swing towards Democrats. Rasmussen, like I already pointed out, it was R plus 8, now down to R plus 5. Let's talk about The Economist. Let's type that in. Refresh here. I don't know why it always does this. We have to. Economist, R plus 5. It was R plus 4 over here. Although, again, this poll actually has more like less undecideds. Prior to that, it was R plus 4, R plus 2 over here. So Economist hasn't really shown a shift. But I believe Politico has shown a bit of a shift. Politico Morning Consult is D plus 3. Prior to that, it was tied. And prior to that, it was D plus 2. So a bit of a shift towards Democrats there. talk about NPR. Let's go to their poll. Okay, they haven't done a poll in a while, but their most recent poll had the Democrats up by 7. Yeah, this poll was crazy because it was D plus 7, whereas back in April it was D plus 5. So that was quite the poll. Marist too, I think, had a bit of a shift towards Democrats. Oh no, that wasn't them. Maybe it was. I think it was USA Today that had the shift. Yeah, USA Today was R plus 9 back in. Oh wait, no, it's D plus 2. It was D plus 2 in February, and now it is tied. So that's actually a smaller shift, but yeah. But like most, like 4 out of every 5 polls we're seeing here, on average, are showing a shift towards the Democratic Party. And if you talk with the polls we've gotten statewide as of late, they've also shown shifts. These are, this is a Democratic affiliated pollster, so it's likely, like, this poll I think overestimated Democrats by 2.5% on average in 2020. So like it's not a fantastic poll, but it's still worth noting. Democrats up 9 in Arizona over Masters. This poll doesn't matter because it's just Lamone. I don't think that he's going to get the nomination, but Kelly's up by 9 over Masters. He'd be beating Lamone too, whatever. Warnock up by 4 over Herschel Walker. Cortez Masto up by 3 over Laxalt. And Hassan up 9 over Don Bolduc. So when you look at all these polls, you've seen shift towards Democrats. And I think there are a lot of conservatives who are happy about Roe being overturned and, that kind of thing. And like, I guess I get that. But at the same time, there are electoral repercussions for Republicans. And I think overall, this might cost them some House seats and a couple Senate seats even in 2022. So thanks for watching this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. By the way, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I'm trying to post every day now because it's summer break and because I have way more free time than I do. It's not the school year. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Hopefully tomorrow. If not, it will be on Monday. Thanks. See you guys later. Bye.